welcome to another episode of TableTalk with Hedera. I am Mance Harmon, the co-founder of Hedera and chair of the Hedera Council. So for those that did not watch our previous episode on TableTalk, we take a closer look at the work of the Hedera Council, the governing body of the Hedera network, and explore the topics and developments that are shaping the network and its ecosystem. Today's conversation focuses on one of those developments, the addition of a new council member, FedEx. Given FedEx's global reach and operational scale, their participation is a meaningful addition to the council and an important moment in the life of the network. In this episode, we're going to dig deeper into why FedEx joined the council and what they bring to Hedera and what their involvement signals for the future. So with that, let's get started. I'm pleased to welcome Dale Christie from FedEx. Dale leads blockchain and digital strategy for the company, bringing a uniquely practical global perspective on how distributed ledger technology can operate at real enterprise scale. Welcome, Dale. Thank you for joining me here today. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're thrilled to be the newest members of the Hedera Council, so thank you very much for that.
Dale, if you would, could you please tell us about yourself and your role at FedEx?
Happy to. I am a business fellow and blockchain strategist for FedEx, focusing on originally blockchain and broadening it out into the digital piece of this. I led the first use case of blockchain at FedEx in 2017. In 2018, I moved over into this role. In 2018, we actually created a global supply chain blockchain, and it worked. And only then did we realize it wouldn't scale. So lots of learnings, for all of us during that period of time. One of our big learning basically was under what set of circumstances. Today we might say what might be true, what must be true to scale. And we really felt that the word open was key there. We didn't really, most people were trying to monetize it and kind of treat it like the internet. And in our case, my default position is the full coverage of FedEx, which is we go to 220 countries and territories. We go literally everywhere in the world that you can go. So does UPS, so does DHL. So, but that's where we all go. And at that level, my default position is essentially the International Space Station. At that level, there's no company, there's no industry, there's no borders. And data knows no geographic borders. It's going to have to work for all. It's going to all have to come together. So we certainly take and have taken a very holistic, a truly global view of this, not only in our own internal efforts from that point of view, but also we are founding members of Blockchain and Transport Alliance, which is now part of the Global Blockchain Business Council. And I am chair of that. We're focused on interoperable, harmonized, and open data movement standards. So again, we believe that not only will the foundational piece be open, be public, certainly people can build on top of that, but foundationally, these systems were really never built for that. They were built at an industry level for customs or maritime or whatever the case may be. And they've done a great job of getting us to where we are right now. But yet, if I take all of us up into the International Space Station and look at that, that's the future. That's where this is going. And we have to find a way to bridge that gap between what we've done for 50 to 150 years in the standard space to the point where we can now connect those dots. And we think Hedera is a great example of that.
Dale, how did you first hear about Hedera?
I've been in the space since probably late 2016, early 2017, and we did our use case. But in 2018 is when we really did our deep learning and our early building, and really started broadening our awareness around, the world, right? The world of what was going on at that point in time. So I was probably aware of Hedera prior to that, prior to, maybe several years ago. But the first contact I remember was part of the Blockchain Research Institute in Toronto with Don and Alex Tapscott. And we are founding members back to 2017. And I was very impressed with the work done, with the rigor. And we've been looking for years for those of like mind. We think that's critical. And we really think that like-minded vision was apparent around public distributed ledgers, governance, and a long-term vision for where this technology would go and essentially how it could work for all.
To follow up on that, what made FedEx interested in getting involved with the Hedera Council?
We realized that we could build the technology, but it was beyond just a technology discussion. And, we learned that digital supply chains don't just scale by adding more technology. They scale when trust scales. And so I don't want to go past what I think is an obvious statement, but the future of global supply chains is digital. And so let me just hit a hard line in the sand on my response on that one, which is we now have 3,000 years or so of trade, right? Starting with a canoe across a river, but you had a proxy of trust that owned the canoe that was separated from supply and demand, from you and me. And we had a middle person there. Well, that's only grown over hundreds and thousands of years to the point where now it may take a couple of dozen documents, hard paper documents, to get something around the world. And we've reached the point where global supply chains, the speed and the complexity of that have simply moved past the ability for paper to keep up with that. And so that, combined with where the technology is right now, allows us to say the future of global supply chains is digital. Once we digitize, now we can move things at essentially light speed, the speed of data, compared to what we've had for all of a civilization. Again, this is kind of a once in a civilization moment where the rearview mirror is paper and papyrus and clay tablets and what got us here. And the windshield is essentially digits, right? Digital, ones and zeros, and the ability to capture that and to move it through these very complex systems, machine learning and AI and everything else that can do that, analytics and optimization. That's what's right in front of us. So the timing of this is not coincidental. We really think we're at this inflection point from that point of view. And so back to the reference I made, which is, digital supply chains scale when trust can scale. So this is really about trust. Most shipment data should stay within company systems, but there's a handful of, a small number of key facts that are going to have to be shared and trusted across many parties. And we think Hedera offers a neutral way to support that shared trust. And we wanted to help shape how that infrastructure evolves. Again, I would go back to, and we can have a 4-hour session on what the definition of the word trust is at this point, but I will simply use the word trust. We are really talking about digital trust. Once we can say we know who he is, we know who she is, we can verify those things, it completely changes all of the kind of construct of the way these systems have been built. Well back prior to when FedEx or others were created. I mean, literally several thousand years. So once we can digitize that, and I can now take the data points from that document, now I don't have to put it on the document and move the document and all those things. That digital native scenario is a complete game changer. It's a complete transformative moment in time as we move forward.
Okay. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for Hedera to add value, specifically across shipping and supply chain operations?
Again, I'll stay in my lane, which is supply chains, global commerce. But a package generates massive amounts of data. There may be, hundreds, maybe low thousands of data points on something that's shipping from you to me across a border, potentially with a sensor. Most of those facts don't really matter, and they probably aren't that interesting to anybody listening to this. However, there's a few facts that truly change responsibility, clearance status, product identity. We think Hedera can help make those key facts independently verifiable. Essentially notarization to some extent. As trade becomes more digital, clearance is also a huge issue, and that becomes more of a permission state based on trusted data and not just a stop at a border. And so just to go slightly deeper on that, again, what we have seen for several thousand years is some proxy of trust that's established. And now, and we saw all that during the pandemic where we couldn't get things on the shelves and we couldn't get ships out of the harbors. And for various reasons from that point of view. But when it now moves at the speed of data, when you are a trusted shipper, when I am a trusted receiver, that data can move through U.S. Customs or other customs agencies at the speed of data and keep it moving. You ship to me once a month. We know you, we know me, we know the product. Don't slow it down. Create the happy path and keep the thing moving. And if that one or more parties or other information is not known, you can certainly slow that down. But that essentially, again, I'm envisioning this, but that essentially does away with what would be known as the port of entry concept, right? Where you go to some country and you now have to clear it physically and all those kinds of things. That's a very different future of global commerce.
Okay, great, Dale. Well, so let me ask, what Hedera capabilities are most relevant to FedEx as you explore supply chain and logistics use cases?
Some of this feels a bit like a repeat, but I think it's important to say, we think Hedera's ability to create tamper-evident records that multiple parties can verify without one company controlling everything is important to us. Governance model also matters in a global trade environment. And it allows companies to retain control over their operational data while sharing only the facts that truly need to be trusted. I don't think the entire purpose is to drive efficiencies, though certainly that's a wonderful outcome, right? We are really at this moment in time, this inflection point, where we now have technology that can digitize, that can do those things. So in a digital native world, that's not where we are right now, but that's where we believe this is going. In a digital native world, I already have your data about your package before you gave it to me. I mean, traditionally, I get your package and then I start creating a bunch of data around it and do those things. But if I had your data before I got the package, I can do all kinds of things with it. We think that's probably that entry point of that digital native data is the beginning of a chain reaction of events that will populate all kinds of things to include the digital twin layer. Digital twins are just facts about something, right, that allow you to model it and do all kinds of things from that point of view. Tokenization, I think that's likely. Again, we're not quite yet there, but we certainly can envision that. We can certainly connect logic to it in terms of, distributed ledger systems and various other things from that point of view. And certainly that creates the value that allows us to track value, that allows us to segment that value. And at that point, you get to things like collateral and all kinds of things that will change the way it's currently being done.
Interesting. So to sort of finish this up, as we look ahead, what are you most excited to build or enable on Hedera with the council in the ecosystem?
We're excited to help define shared trust standards that work across industries and borders. Over time, trusted product identity and movement facts can enable supply chains to operate, as I said before, at the speed of data, while importantly maintaining accountability and also oversight.
Dale, I have to ask. So, of course, AI is all the rage these days, and it looks like it's going to transform society. We maybe are at the height of the hype cycle, but even so, it looks like it's very significant, one of the most significant advancements since the Industrial Revolution, perhaps. Where does AI play a role in this conversation?
I'm going to give you part of my chair of BIDA and GBBC, the Standards Council, answer, because we actually did a paper on this that's out in the public space. It starts with harmonized and interoperable standards. So that's step one. The next one is open, which about half of the international standards development entities are open, have open standards, and some do not. But the private standards, the ones you have to pay for, are a barrier to entry from a global commerce point of view. So we think open is critical to that. And once you get to harmonized, interoperable, and open, you get to digital. You get to the word digital. And at that point, that's actually where the clouds part and the choirs sing, because now we can digitize everything. And beyond that, you get to distributed ledgers and blockchain. You get to digital identity, which we talked a little bit about. You get to AI, you get to every other emerging technology. So that's actually where it really opens up from that point of view. And so we think all of those things are going to be critical. But once we digitize these processes, we get everything else. So an AI agent, for example, as I would say, AI agents will act, and we think DLT and blockchain will enforce. And said another way, you want both, right? You need both. You can't just have AI agents going out and doing all kinds of things on your behalf that you don't know about without any rules or governance or kind of rails. And we think DLTs will enforce that. You'll have smart contracts that will say, if this happens, do this. If then, whatever the case may be. But we think they are absolutely compatible. I would even say they may be each other's killer app.
I think that's exactly right. My vision is that there will end up being a new layer of infrastructure that gets developed that, maybe one way of describing it is a control plane for AIs that help to enforce policy as well as compliance with regulatory controls. That's going to be really interesting to be a part of and to work with you in the coming years as we sort of develop that concept and understand how it should be applied. Dale, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for becoming part of the council. Looking forward to working with you in the years to come.
Hope that was helpful. It was nice to meet everybody. Appreciate your great work here.
Thank you, Dale, for joining me for this episode of Table Talk. Stay tuned for the next one, where we'll dive into new Hedera Council updates and much more. As a reminder, you can always visit HederaCouncil.org for the latest meeting minutes, and we'll see you next time.